The Pontius Pilate Stone, How a Parking Lot Discovery Silenced the Skeptics. June 1961. An Italian archaeological team is excavating an ancient Roman theater in Caesarea, Israel. It's hot, it's dusty. They're digging through centuries of rubble, broken stones, construction debris, the kind of stuff you'd normally just toss aside. And then archaeologist Maria Teresa Fortuna Canavit spots something. A limestone block. Nothing special, being used as a step in an ancient staircase. Covered in dirt and grime, she kneels down, wipes off the surface, and there it is, carved into the stone. 3 Latin words that would silence an entire generation of skeptics. Pontius Pilatus, Prefectus Iudaei, Pontius Pilate, Prefect of Judea. The first archaeological evidence, the only archaeological evidence, that Pontius Pilate, the man who sentenced Jesus Christ to death, actually existed. Now here's what you need to understand about what things were like before this discovery. For decades, actually for centuries, skeptics had been questioning whether Pontius Pilate was even a real person. Sure, the Gospels mention him, all 4 of them. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all describe Pilate presiding over Jesus' trial. They give details about his personality, his decision-making, his political situation. But critics said, the Gospels aren't reliable historical sources. They're religious propaganda. Show us real evidence. Okay, what about ancient historians? The Jewish historian Josephus mentions Pilate multiple times in his work Antiquities of the Jews, written around 94 AD. He describes Pilate's brutal rule, his conflicts with the Jewish population, his eventual removal from office. The Roman historian Tacitus, writing around 116 AD, mentions that Jesus was executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. The Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria, a contemporary of Pilate, describes him in detail, calling him corrupt, cruel, and responsible for executions without trial. So we have 3 independent ancient sources outside the Bible confirming Pilate existed. But the skeptics said, not good enough. Those are just literary references. Where's the physical evidence? Where are the inscriptions? Where are the monuments? Where are the administrative records? And there was nothing. 0. For 19 centuries, not a single piece of physical archaeological evidence bearing Pontius Pilate's name had ever been found. No inscriptions in Jerusalem, no monuments in Rome, no official documents, nothing. And so the skeptics grew more confident. They said, if Pilate was such an important Roman official, if he governed an entire province for 10 years, why is there no physical trace of him? Obviously, he's a fiction invented by Christian writers. Gap 3S. And then June 1961 happened. Dr. Antonio Frova's team was excavating the ancient theater in Caesarea. This theater was built by Herod the Great around 2210 BC. It's a massive structure, one of the first Roman-style theaters in the eastern Mediterranean. But by the 4th century, the theater had fallen into disrepair. People were salvaging stones from other buildings to repair it. They were using whatever they could find. And someone grabbed a limestone dedication block, probably from a demolished temple, and turned it face down to use as a step, face down, which is the only reason the inscription survived. If it had been face up, 1,600 years of foot traffic would have worn it smooth. Let's talk about what the stone actually says. The inscription is damaged, parts are missing, but enough remains that scholars can reconstruct it with confidence. Line 1, Des Tiberium. Line 2, Ius Pilatus. Line 3, Praectus Iudaei. Translated, to the divine Augusti, this Tiberium, Pontius Pilate, Prefect of Judea, has dedicated this. Let's break this down. Divine Augusti refers to the deceased Roman Emperor Augustus and his wife Livia. They had been deified, worshipped as gods after their deaths. Augustus died in 14 AD. Livia died in 29 AD. Tiberium was probably a temple or public building dedicated to the current emperor, Tiberius, who ruled from 14 to 37 AD. Tiberius was the adopted son of Augustus and the biological son of Livia. Pilate was building this structure to honor the imperial family. Classic Roman brown nosing. You build temples to the emperor, you show your loyalty, you keep your job. And right there in the middle, Pontius Pilate, Prefectus Iudaei. His name, his title, his province. Here's why this matters so much. This inscription dates to Pilate's own lifetime. It's contemporary evidence. It's not a later Christian text trying to make Jesus' story seem more credible. It's not a Roman historian writing decades after the fact. This is a stone commissioned by Pilate himself, carved during his rule, placed in a building he dedicated. You can't get more reliable than that. And here's something fascinating that the stone revealed. For centuries, scholars had assumed Pilate's title was Procurator of Judea. That's what the Roman historian Tacitus called him. That's what everyone believed. But the Pilate stone says Prefectus, Prefect, not Procurator. What's the difference? A Procurator was mainly a financial administrator. A prefect was a military and administrative governor with broader authority, including the power to execute criminals, which means the Gospels got it right. Pilate had the authority to sentence Jesus to crucifixion. He wasn't just a pencil pusher managing taxes, he was the man in charge. Now let's talk about where this stone was found. It was discovered in Caesarea Maritima, not Jerusalem. Why? Because Caesarea was Pilate's headquarters. It was the administrative capital of Judea. It was a beautiful coastal city with Roman architecture, Roman baths, a Roman theater, a hippodrome. Jerusalem, on the other hand, was a nightmare for Roman governors. It was a hotbed of religious fanaticism. The Jews hated Roman rule. Riots were common. It was tense, hostile, dangerous. So Pilate stayed in Caesarea most of the time. He only went to Jerusalem when he had to during major Jewish festivals like Passover, when tensions ran high and the Roman presence was needed to keep order. Which is exactly when Jesus was arrested. Pilate was in Jerusalem for Passover. Jesus was brought before him. Pilate questioned him. And ultimately, under pressure from the crowd and the Jewish authorities, Pilate sentenced him to crucifixion. The geography matches, the timeline matches, the authority matches. Everything the Gospels describe about Pilate's role is corroborated by this single stone. So what happened when the Pilate stone was discovered? Did the skeptics apologize? Did they say, wow, we were wrong to doubt this? Maybe we should reconsider our entire approach to the Gospels? Nope. They just moved the goalposts. Okay, fine, Pilate existed, but that doesn't mean Jesus existed. That doesn't prove the crucifixion happened. That doesn't validate the resurrection. Fair enough. The Pilate stone doesn't prove Jesus existed. It proves Pilate existed. That's all. But here's my question. If critics were so confident that Pilate was fictional, if they were willing to dismiss him as a gospel invention despite multiple ancient historians confirming his existence, what does that tell you about their methodology? Because this keeps happening, over and over and over. Critics say, there's no evidence for King David. He's obviously a legend. Then in 1993, archaeologists discover the Tel Dan Stele, an inscription from the 9th century BC mentioning the House of David. Critics shut up about David. Critics say, the Pool of Bethesda in the Gospel of John is fiction. John says it had 5 porticos. That's a weird architectural detail. He made it up. Then in 1888, archaeologists excavate the Pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, exactly where John said it would be, with 5 porticos, just like he described. Critics shut up about the Pool of Bethesda. Critics say, the Gospels claim Jesus was buried in a tomb after crucifixion, but Romans didn't allow that. Crucified criminals were left on crosses to rot or thrown in mass graves. The Gospel burial story is fiction. Then archaeologists discover the ossuary of Yehohanan, a Jewish man crucified in the 1st century, with a nail still through his heel bone, buried in a family tomb. Critics shut up about crucifixion burials. Do you see the pattern? Critics confidently declare something in the Bible is obviously false because there's no evidence for it. Then archaeology finds the evidence, and critics just move on to the next target. So here's my question, and I want you to answer this in the comments. How many times does this have to happen before we stop giving skeptics the benefit of the doubt? If they've been wrong about David, wrong about Pilate, wrong about the Pool of Bethesda, wrong about crucifixion burials, at what point do we say, maybe your methodology is flawed? Because here's what really gets me. When it comes to other ancient figures, Greek philosophers, Roman emperors, Persian kings, we accept their existence based on a few literary mentions and maybe a coin or two. Nobody demands multiple inscriptions to prove Julius Caesar existed. Nobody says, show me 3 pieces of physical evidence or I won't believe Socrates was real. But when it comes to biblical figures, suddenly the standard is impossibly high. Show me an inscription, show me a monument, show me administrative records. Otherwise, it's all made up. Why? Even Bart Ehrman, a skeptical New Testament scholar who doesn't believe Jesus was divine, who doesn't believe in the resurrection, admits this double standard exists. He writes, "What archaeological evidence do we have about Pilate's rule in Palestine? We have some coins that were issued during his reign, and only one, single fragmentary inscription discovered at Caesarea Maritima in 1961. Nothing else. And what writings do we have from him? Not a single word. Does that mean he didn't exist? No. He is mentioned in several passages in Josephus and in the writings of Philo and in the Gospels. He certainly existed." Ehrman's point is this: we have more evidence for Pilate than for almost any other Roman governor of Judea. And yet, before 1961, critics were still saying he was fictional. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to talk about. Archaeological discovery is random. The Pilate Stone could have easily been missed. If the excavators had been digging 3 feet to the left, they would have missed it entirely. If that stone had been used face up as a step instead of face down, it would have been worn smooth by 1,600 years of foot traffic, and we'd never be able to read it. If 4th century builders had chosen a different stone to reuse, this one might still be buried somewhere. It was luck, pure luck. So how much are we missing? How many other inscriptions are buried 3 feet underground, waiting to be found? How many biblical figures are we dismissing as mythical simply because we haven't stumbled on their names carved in stone yet? Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found something doesn't mean it never existed. Here's what I think the real issue is. This isn't about evidence. It's about assumptions. If you start with the assumption that the Bible is unreliable, that it's myth, legend, religious propaganda, then you'll dismiss every biblical claim until you're forced to accept it. And even when you're forced to accept it, you'll minimize it. You'll say, okay, fine, this part is true, but that doesn't mean the rest is true. But if you start with the assumption that ancient texts, biblical or otherwise, generally reflect real history, unless proven otherwise, you'll approach the evidence very differently. Let me give you a thought experiment. Imagine the Pilate Stone had never been found. Imagine we still had 0 archaeological evidence for Pontius Pilate. Would that mean Pilate never existed? Or would it just mean we hadn't found the evidence yet? The critics would say no evidence means he probably didn't exist. The Gospels are unreliable. Pilate is fiction. But the historians would say, we have Josephus, we have Tacitus, we have Philo. Multiple independent sources confirm Pilate existed. The lack of physical evidence just means we haven't found it yet. Who's right? Well, in June 1961, we got our answer. So what does this mean for other biblical figures? It means we should be cautious about dismissing them as mythical just because we haven't found inscriptions with their names on them. It means we should give ancient texts, including the Bible, the same benefit of the doubt we give other ancient sources. It means we should remember that archaeology is a slow, random, incomplete process. We're finding new things every year. And every year, critics who were so confident about what never happened have to revise their positions. Here's my personal take. The Pilate Stone should have been a wake-up call. It should have made critics rethink their approach, but it wasn't, and they didn't. Because admitting you were wrong is hard. Changing your entire worldview based on new evidence is hard. It's much easier to just say, okay, fine, Pilate existed, but that doesn't change anything else. So what do you think? Should we give biblical texts the same benefit of the doubt we give other ancient sources? Or should they be held to an impossibly high standard of proof? Drop your answer in the comments. And tell me this, if the Pilate stone had never been found, would that prove Pilate never existed? Or would it just prove that archaeology is incomplete? Because I think there's a huge difference between those two things, and I think critics confuse them on purpose. One more thing before I go. The Pilate stone is currently in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. You can go see it. There's a replica in Caesarea at the original site. It's not much to look at, just a broken chunk of limestone with some worn Latin letters, but it's one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, because it proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the ancient texts are telling the truth, even when the skeptics say they're not. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Are the skeptics right to demand ironclad physical evidence before accepting biblical claims? Or are they applying a double standard that they'd never apply to other ancient figures? I'm waiting to hear what you think, because this debate isn't going away, and I want to know where you stand.